Hello everyone. The English version of what I just posted in Sinhala is this one, and it's the first of a series where I try to answer some of the questions that I am most often asked. People ask me in real life, in which case I can actually tell them, or they ask me on FB Messenger, in which case I don't normally reply on one-to-one basis. So I thought if I record some of the ideas I have on these issues, it might help some people. And the first of it is on reading, which I think is very, very important. But I will also mention the other issues I will deal with this. So today I'll be talking about how to practice reading, because reading is very often very difficult to teach. So I hope some English teachers are also listening in, because they might carry something away from this lecture. Then I thought I'm going to make these very short. So even connected issues I'll do as separate chats. The second one I thought I'll talk about what kind of books you should be reading, or whatever that question is very often asked from me. Tell us what to read. So I'll be dealing with that second. Then third, some parents ask me who have very small children, what should we do to improve the language of our kids? Even if they don't know English, can we help our children? I'll be answering that third. And then a very common one to which I have answered it elsewhere. How do we overcome the fear of using English? We are scared to speak English. We don't like English. How can we overcome that? So I'll be dealing with that as my fourth program. Fifthly, the accent. People ask or sometimes, challenge me when I talk about Sri Lankan accent. So the issue of accent I'll be dealing with next. The sixth one, the most important in any skill development, vocabulary. How do I improve? How do people, what aid can they use to improve their vocabulary, word knowledge in English? Then I will be dealing with the question of exposure, because all language teachers know that exposing yourself to a language helps in language learning. And people from very remote areas ask me, okay, fine to say that, but how do we expose ourselves? I'll be answering that as my seventh lecture. And the final one, the issue of grammar. Such a bugbear. Should we know grammar? Is it important to learn grammar? And all that I'll be dealing with last. So today, I'm coming back to today's lecture, which is on reading and how to practice reading. I must start by saying that if you like, or if you are capable of reading in English, and if you have developed the habit of reading in English, you're already more than halfway there, because reading is vital in vocabulary development, in learning grammar without even knowing you're learning grammar, right? And in writing, and obviously in reading. It's a fundamental skill, and many people in this country now in very good positions have learned English through this skill. If you have followed my Atharamadiava channel, you would have heard Professor Liyanage Amarakirti speak about how much reading helped him become what he is. And, he started from a very rural area with almost no exposure to English, and how he used the library, and he ended up by getting a PhD from the USA. So it's possible through reading, not only, but it's very, very possible to be really unafraid of using language if you are a reader. Professor Asanga Tilakaratna spoke about how he learned through reading. Kaushalya Kumarasinghe spoke about how he learned English. All of them did so to show you that it's possible, even if you're not born into a context without much English. So let's deal with the question of reading first. Now, this YouTube, because it's YouTube, many people with various levels of English knowledge will be listening. Some of you may have quite an advanced knowledge of English, but might be stuck at reading academic articles, saying, okay, we know we can read a newspaper, but can't read academic articles. What do we do? In fact, I was asked that question just yesterday. And then some of you might have very little knowledge of English, or you might be a teacher listening to me who has students with very little knowledge of English. Okay, so the pointers I give today will help you at various levels if you know how to put it into practice. So it doesn't matter which level you are, if you're listening to me, listen, some of these things might help you. Right, the first thing is, like any other skill, like swimming, like learning to play the violin, you need to practice. With practice only can you improve reading. And like everything else, we forget that, language learning isn't automatic. You have to put in the work. You have to work. It's not going to suddenly come to you. All the names I mentioned before, Professor Amarakirti, Professor Tilakaratna, Kaushalya, they did the work necessary to get to that knowledge of English. Practicing is necessary. And how do we do this? Now, one thing that I must tell you is that every one of us carry knowledge of the world in our heads. From any language, if you're an adult especially, you already have general knowledge in your head. And for example, if you're reading in Sinhala, the moment you see a title of, say, a newspaper article, you can guess what is going to be discussed in that article, right? Because we have in our heads a structure, or I will call it schemata, because that's a word that is normally used. We all carry schemata or schema, the plural is schemata, in our heads, which are, it's difficult to define it exactly, but just get a general idea, which are knowledge. Little cells that carry particular knowledge connected to our life experiences and all that. So for example, if you see Riana Turak as a title, Adivegi Margaye, you can, all the knowledge connected to an accident or a Riana Tura would get activated in your head. And you know that when you're reading that article, that knowledge would anyway be making it easy for you to read it in Sinhala also. Because without you knowing, without you consciously being aware, that knowledge is already activated. Now, activating schemata is very, very important when you're reading in a second language, because the brain might read even if the eye is puzzled. For example, if you know English somewhat, right? You have seen on FB these little games, people write something with every word spelled wrong. But still, your brain makes sense of it. Because with practice, your brain knows what to expect in that context. Or they might write something with the words inverted. But you would have read it almost as if the words were in the correct order. Because that is where the disconnect between the eye and the brain happens. The brain, if it is practiced enough, would already have read it the way it's supposed to be, and not the way your eye read it. So this is where you need to trust the subconscious, sometimes unconscious processes of the brain getting used to stuff, even if your eye or you are not aware of it. And this is the cruciality of practice. Even if you are a very basic learner, if you keep reading, getting your eye practiced looking at English text, you might not know it, but the brain is memorizing some shapes, some forms, and it might help you when you're consciously, you think you're stuck, but the brain might actually help you guess what the word is. So I'm going to put some very important words up here. I already put schemata, and you need to activate schemata. How do we do it? We use the, excuse me, I type very fast and often wrong. We use the framework, which helps us know what context. These are all important words I'm putting up. What context we are dealing with in that particular article. So, for example, the example I gave is, for example, if you see this in a newspaper article, you know that that article will have words connected to this, and that it can't have words connected to, say, a recipe or music, unless it's a musician who was involved in it. But what I'm saying is, it will give you a framework in which your already existing schemata is now active and will help you, this is crucial, guess what words are. All readers, even very fluent English speakers, even in the US or whatever, very often we guess words. And the guessing, if you're not a medical science reader or a medical student or a science student, it doesn't, I'm saying doesn't have to be 100% correct if it's generally, related to arts and not medicine and science. Your guess, even if it is 50% correct, it must be this, it must be a name of a car, it must be a name of a brake system or whatever. Even if you guess roughly, the idea of the sentence you understand. And that is enough. That is enough for you to get the message, communication to happen. So the first advice I give you is read the context. Secondly, when you read the context, you can guess, right? So first, read the context. Secondly, when you read the context, you can guess. And to read the context, you can use the framework. Now, what is a framework? In a newspaper, it's very easy. Newspapers always have photographs, which will give you a clue as to what the article is. Books have titles. The moment you see a title, you can guess, okay, this is not a novel. This has something to do with fiction, maybe the genre. And if you take a book out, okay, this is a novel. The word itself, The Brief History of 7 Killings, right? The word itself, you can read the title. If it's a YouTube channel, you can read the thumbnail. Now, anyone who is listening to me now read the thumbnail and knew I was going to talk about reading, because it says it's about reading. So even if you didn't understand any other word, your general knowledge binds you within a framework in which it makes it easy to guess, right? So always a very important context, apart from the, you can have photos, and you can have the very important thing which exists everywhere is the title. The title. That title will immediately put boundaries on what you can expect in that article, unless it's a creative writing thing. Because, for example, A Brief History of 7 Killings, you'll have to be very, very, very creative to figure out exactly what he's talking about. And that's what good novels do. It doesn't give you an idea of what to expect. But generally, if you're reading a newspaper or even something semi-academic means not quite academic, maybe a series of articles, and you can guess roughly what it means, right? So photos, title, read the context, because when you read the context, what you expect is clearly defined by your existing schemata, your existing general knowledge. So the example I can give in real life, and I gave this example even in Sinhala, my friend who writes in Tamil, Ayadure Santan, he said when he lived in Colombo, he used to travel by bus quite a lot from his boarding place to the workplace. He used to read the name boards in Sinhala. Those days, name boards actually appeared a lot in Sinhala. And he said he learned Sinhala writing and the shape of the letters through that. through name boards. Because, for example, if you see a shop with cement and chains and pails and spades, you can guess it's a hardware shop. So the word on top can't be fruit. It has to be hardware or something. That's Sinhala and English, both we say hardware. So reading the context makes it easy to guess what the words are. Don't worry if you don't understand the word 100%, just keep going. So my third thing I want to say is, don't stop when you come across a difficult word. Keep reading the whole text. I mean, you start with short text if you're a reader. At least 3 times. So this is the crucial thing. If you stop the moment you find a difficult word, you're going to give up. You're going to feel scared. And when you're scared, everything that works normally, this is a life fact. When you're scared, everything that works normally just stops, right? When you're a learner without much knowledge of English, when you read the very first word you don't know, if you start being scared, then you're going to have problems of not giving up, right? So you've got to skip. You've got to skip over the word and keep reading right to the bottom. That is a way of overcoming fear. Don't stop at the first word you do not understand. Go past, hop over the difficult word and keep reading till you come. I tell my students at least 3 times. Do not give up at least 3 times. Just keep your eye over the word. Sometimes, it will be hard to believe. Very often, if you know some English, on the third reading, your brain would have put a word there, even if you thought you didn't know. And if you remember, when I say guess, I said guess if you don't know, your guess would very often be correct. So do not stop at the first difficult word. Read your eyes over it at least 3 times. The third time, you might be guessing. And now this is where practicing comes in. So the next point I'm going to highlight in my lecture today is, again, I'm going to put this in capital words here. You have to practice. You have to practice, because the more you practice, the third reading will probably give you a better idea of what the word is. Because your brain would have, say you practice reading every day. Say the first day when you read the third time, you only got one guessed word. But if you do it for a month, the end of the month, I'm sure your brain would have substituted more words with a rough idea of what they mean than before. The best example I can give you is actually of myself. When I got the PhD only this year, and I still am, hopefully, a creative writer. And one of the things I was scared of was writing in an academic fashion, because my natural inclination is to write creatively, which is not accepted normally in academic writing. And I remember asking my friend, Professor Harshana Rambukwala, and I said, this style, both of reading and writing, I'm not very confident about. He told me this, and absolutely valuable advice, which I'm sharing with you today. He said, if you do your job properly as a PhD student, right? If you read continuously for about 3 years, the kind of writing you want to write, eventually, you are going to learn it. You can't escape that, because you will be writing the stuff that you're reading. And honestly, there were articles I could not understand in English, or it was very difficult to understand in English at the beginning. But at the end of the 4th year, I was actually reading them without even realizing they were difficult. But it took me years of practice, years of reading. And that is why I always say, please be suspicious of people who say, learn English in 3 months. Yes, you can. You can learn to say, how are you? how old are you and all that. You can learn it at a very superficial level. Learning is always at different gradations. And something that worries me about online teaching, I teach online English in campus now. I doubt whether any real learning is happening unless the student is committed to put in the word. Because you can easily cheat yourself and pass exams online. But very often they don't realize they are doing themselves a disservice by not putting in the hard work, because learning can happen at very superficial levels, just parroting stuff, or real level in which you learn English where you might actually be reading academic stuff and maybe even doing PhDs, possible. But you've got to put in the work, you've got to practice. It does not happen like a magic wand. If you're not willing enough to put in the work, you may not get it. So I'm hoping those who are listening to me today are those who are willing to put in the work, right? Excuse me, I'm going to put my shelf down because I think the fan is bothering my, it shakes a bit. Right, this will be better. So my share screen, I put 3 words down here. I put guess context from framework and don't stop, keep reading. And the 4th very important thing, please practice. Okay, when I say please practice, and I'm going to discuss this issue in my later lecture, where do we find material to practice? Earlier in my campus, I used to tell students, you get an English newspaper to the hostels. I don't know whether that happens anymore, but now you have online material. Anything from newspapers to creative fiction, anything can be found online. So if you have a phone and you can somehow pay for the internet connection, you do not have the excuse of saying, I don't have material. It's all over you. If you put English text, basic reading, you will get text, right? You've got to practice. Remember everything I said here, and keep doing it for about maybe 3 or 4 months, depending on your level, you will be better at reading. And if you have listened to the interviews I did with Professor Amarakirti, Professor Tilakaratna, and Kaushali Kumarasinghe, all of them said reading helped us. Okay? You might need one-to-one practice with speaking or with listening. Yes, only reading is not enough to deal with 4 skills, but reading will help in vocabulary, will subconsciously teach you grammar, with spelling, and with knowledge. Reading is where you get knowledge of various things. So I hope if you listen to me carefully here, you will start practicing from today. It is possible. A lot of people have learned it the difficult way. Some of us had it easy. We had, books in English or parents reading to us in English when we were small. Some of us don't have it. And that's one of the reasons I'm also trying to have an English for Fun project for primary school children, but that's a different topic altogether. Whoever is listening now, if you're a teacher, please tell this to your students. If you're a student, you can be, for example, like me, a 50-year-old student, 53-year-old student, learn this. Practice, get it, read something you like. Again, that's another topic I will do, next. But this is my lecture on how to practice reading, which is crucial if you want to learn a second language. So the first lecture I will end here. Very, very connected lectures are going to be the next 2. What should you read and all that, how to improve vocabulary. And I'll be dealing with these interconnected issues in different videos, because I think keeping this short is important. Thank you very much.